Hello and welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the CBB Super Show. I'm your host, Walt Waddell, aka Dub Deuce 85, and we are, of course, brought to you by the world famous FTN Network. We just got done grinding through a pretty solid day of hoops here on Tuesday. DFS was high scoring because of the broken prices. Betting was pretty solid. Props were pretty solid overall. A nice little Tuesday there. I don't know if there's enough time to go to Home Depot. Shout out to anyone who knows what that's from. We are going to go through here a 8-game main slate on DraftKings. We'll do what we did last night, cover each game, talk about some of the plays that we like best, circle back around with a 3-man core, and then bring up any best bets, prop betting opportunities, prize picks, underdog, all of that good stuff. Nice thing about this 8-game slate is not only that it's 8 games, not 5, not 4, not 2, not 1, but it's got a lot of low to mid-major teams on it, which we absolutely love. Teams like Bryant, UTEP, Dartmouth, got some Ivy League action. Fairleigh Dickinson, who has one of my favorite players in all of college basketball on their team. We'll get to him. Eastern Kentucky, Colgate, who has been a fun Patriot League team for years, and then Cal Baptist, who was just on a slate. Geez, what was it? Not even a week ago against UCF, right? I guess it was over a week ago, about 8 days ago. So we're familiar with that team at this point. Pretty fun one. Lasts a lot longer, late into the night. And a more traditional lock time of 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. None of this 3:30, 6:30 business. Okay, it's hard for those of us on the West Coast. We need that half an hour. And being on the East Coast, man, gotta be so nice having slate start at 7. I know the trade-off is that you're watching games till midnight, but that's not a bad thing, is it? Doesn't seem like it. If you are new to the program, I will ask that you make sure you subscribe on the FTN Network YouTube channel. Please make sure you hit the like button if you're a returner and or new. Watching on YouTube and or Twitter/X, those reposts, retweets, likes, and comments, all those interactions help us a tremendous amount. Basically, you know how it is with social media. Interactions are king. So all of that support that you can provide for us is very, very appreciative. Helps us with our site and just bringing you the best possible content that we can. Right now, the Super Show is going to be Monday, Tuesday, and Friday nights. That's the college basketball version. Saturday morning shows have pretty much gone away at this point. May bring 1 or 2 back here depending on the bowl game slate schedule, which we're diving into more tomorrow and kind of getting that all laid out. There will be a ton of coverage for the bowl games, the CFP playoff bracket. We'll be having written content for each day, giving DFS plays, overall, thoughts about how the game will play out, any best bets, any prop betting stuff, just overall we'll have you covered for each and every day. That first round of bowl games starting on Saturday, December 14th. We also have the Army-Navy game. And of course we have the Heisman presentation, which is definitely going to go to Mr. Hunter, Travis Hunter, holding a Cam Ward ticket that I would love to see still win. It's not going to, but busy weekend for sure coming up. Let's get into this 8-game slate, what you're here for. We're going to kick it off with Bryant versus St. John's. Bryant, another team that they were on a slate once before, the last week or so when they played Drexel. That was a pretty fun game. Bryant typically is a really fantasy-friendly, fast-paced squad. This one is a 22-point spread in favor of St. John's, total of 161. Pulling up the efficiency stuff for the Bryant Bulldogs. They're 7th in tempo so far this season, coming off the big win over a non-D1, 122-63. Before that, they had beat Drexel, which was last Monday, and then they had a close loss, 76-75 against Brown. Haven't played a tremendous amount of teams here. Ken Palm has it 88-68 in favor of St. John's. Bryant's probably going to lose, but there are a ton of players here that we can utilize. They have done a really nice job over the last few years in the portal. They have had a myriad of coaches. Right now, they're coached by Phil Martelli Jr., who is an absolute stud. They had Jared Grasso there for a couple of years. You know how dramatic and just the scandalous stuff that happened with him. And then Tim O'Shea. But yeah, I like this Bryant team. They have Earl Timberlake as their de facto leader. He had spent a significant amount of time with Miami, Memphis, but he spent the last 3 years with Bryant, where he has ascended to the top of the mountain there. Now, he did not play in their last game, which was against the non-D1. They didn't need him to. So a lot of times with these games, we're just about done with those. I hate the non-D1 games. Like, it's cool that they have those, but they should be at the beginning of the season only. We see a lot of stuff where starting lineups are different. Players don't play, and it kind of throws things off. But yeah, he did not play in the non-D1 opponent game there, just for reference, but I don't expect that to be anything to scare us. They also have Raphael Pinson, who was on St. John's for a couple of seasons, transferred to Bryant last year. He's been there the last two, has really thrived, become the 1B to Earl Timberlake's 1A against Drexel. He put up a massive 31-point, 2 rebound, 3 assists, 2 steal game at low rostership. Definitely like him. They also have Barry Evans, who transferred in from St. Bonaventure, solid offensive rebounder and scorer. And then overall, a bunch of solid guys like Kevon Kramer, Ja'Kai Robinson, who transferred in from Miami as well. The roster's nice. And then, of course, we know St. John's. They've been on the slate a million times. They have a very deep team, but it really comes down to 2 players for St. John's, rostering R.J. Lewis, who does a little bit of everything, a lot of everything, honestly, and then Zubi Ejiofor, who is finally priced appropriately. Thank the DK pricing algorithm and the human element there. Zubi, who has been underpriced the entire season. 6'6" last slate, give me a break, 5'9", 5'4", 4'7", 4'6". Now he's priced at 8'6". That still might not be enough, but at least at 8'6", if he puts up a 30, 40, you're not dead to rights if you fade. Could put up an even bigger score than that. He has been fantastic. RJ Lewis priced up there at 9'4". There is a lot of good options here on both sides. On the Bryant side, it starts for me with Raphael Pinson, who's still underpriced at 6'5", was only 6'3" against Drexel. We probably should have been on him even heavier that day. Gonna play 35 plus minutes, playing against the former team that he started with, St. John's. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a chip on his shoulder there, playing against his former team that he didn't really get the opportunities that he probably felt like he deserved. Not going to be a big peripherals guy. I don't expect him to grab rebounds against this St. John's team. He'll get some steals, he'll get some assists, but he's going to be a primary scorer for them. Certainly in play. Earl Timberlake at 8'2". That's a little cheap for him. Defensively, I think they'll have Richmond in his pocket. They'll have a lot of defensive pressure on Timberlake that he's going to have to handle. I do prefer Pinson there. Barry Evans is also affordable at 6.2K, but would be worried about potential foul trouble there on the road going up against that strong front court of St. John's. The other starters, guys like Connor Withers, he's too expensive for me at 7'6". Couldn't imagine paying that price. He very well could be the one that gets the worst part of the defense because he's not, he's like the 4th or 5th option, but perhaps maybe some GPP looks there, but he's definitely lower on the priority list for us. And then Keyshawn Mitchell being the other starter. Certainly like Mitchell at 5.1K. had some foul issues against Drexel, ineffectiveness. They ended up not playing him there. Did return and play 30 minutes against Brown. You're typically going to see him play anywhere between 20 to 25. I do think he's an interesting option, but definitely not a priority. And then Kevon Kramer, who did draw a start against Drexel, played 30 minutes in that one at 4.7K, only played 2 against Brown off the bench because of foul trouble, got 4. That is his calling card. He fouls a lot, but if he were to get back in the starting lineup, I would have some interest there in Kramer. Doesn't have to do a ton to pay off the 4.7. And then Ja'Kai Robinson there at 3.5. He's playing about 15 minutes off the bench. Once Earl Timberlake is out of eligibility next year, I think we'll see Ja'Kai be a lot more of a factor. Not much of one this time. Again, the St. John's team, RJ Lewis at 9.4, Zuby Ejiofor at 8.6. Those are the two options you really want to look at. I don't foresee myself getting too involved with any others. Lewis is always great, guard forward eligibility. He's very handsy. He's very aggressive. We know foul trouble can really knock him sideways. It did against Kansas State. He put up 27 at 9.7. That's not going to get it done. Against Harvard, he put up a 48. Certainly don't mind him. I think we have enough value on this slate. Some guys who are mispriced to fit him if we want to. And then Zuby going up against that Bryant, front court, which has been pretty decent rebounding the basketball. They play at a fast pace. There's going to be a ton of opportunities for rebounds for Zuby, block opportunities on the guys who like to drive, such as Timberlake. The one thing I would worry about is, hey, he scored 28 real against K-State. I don't think he's going to do that. Maybe he gets somewhere between 15 to 18 real. All those peripherals mixed in. It's just a very expensive price. Barring foul trouble, he should have a really nice game. How nice of a game, how much of a ceiling, that remains to be seen, but this is certainly the matchup for it. If St. John's ends up beating them by 20 plus, though, minutes being lost in the second half is a very real possibility. You have Kaderi Richmond and Davon Smith. Both were absolute studs at Utah and Seton Hall last year in a much more crowded situation. They have their moments, but really not playable to me yet. When you see those prices come down or into the conference play, maybe the rotation, the minutes are more solidified and those two are playing over 30 minutes, then we can really look to them again. Aaron Scott has GPP viability at 5.9K. Does come with guard forward eligibility as well. Simeon Wilcher is there at 5.1. He's been a solid value look. The youngster, he's going to be really good next year. And then you have, secondary looks like Brady Dunlap, who starts occasionally, gets 20 plus minutes. This would be a game where I think he's a pretty sneaky value at 3.6. I wouldn't use him in a main build or single entry by any means. But if you're a multi-enter, throwing those lineups in the jam, I'm always going to call it the jam. I know it's called something else now. But I could see him creep closer to 20 minutes and get a lot of activity in garbage time there, hitting some threes, getting some rebounds. So don't sleep on Brady Dunlap. It's going to be a kind of play that's not for the faint of heart. He's going to have like 1 to 2 fantasy points for the first 30 minutes of the game. But that last 10, he has an opportunity to put up 15 plus fantasy points in a hurry. All right, moving on to the next one, we have UTEP versus Louisville. Things are they're getting raw. They're getting rough for Louisville. Before the season even started, really, it only had just gotten started. Abakur Traore, missing with an injury, with an arm issue, out until deep January. We'll see. I'm worried he's not even going to come back at all. Kashawn Pryor, who, had been really good off the bench. They moved him to the starting lineup. He blows out his knee. He's done for the season. Corin Johnson, who was knocked out early in the season, has decided the shoulder is not going to get better this year. He's going to take a medical red shirt. I love Corin Johnson. You guys know that. So they're really severely shorthanded, and also other guys who are playing banged up already. So the Louisville rotation is suddenly very appealing. We're looking at 7, 8 guys at most, even in games where maybe they blow them out. Ken Pom does have this one 76 to 65 against UTEP. I do think UTEP is live to keep this one competitive and possibly cover. It's going to be real hard. Louisville is not going to be, anything's better than the last 2 years. They will win this game, but they're 15-point favorites on DraftKings right now, a total of 144. I do think UTEP can and will cover that 15. So Louisville's they're going to be tired, man. They played Duke pretty well at the Yum Center, but they did have a 7-man rotation. Starting lineup right now, Chucky Hepburn, Javon Hadley, Rain Smith, James Scott, who I like a lot as a sophomore, Noah Waterman, Terrence Edwards, and Connie Ruths off the bench. They're not even using Frank Anselm, who was a bit of a interesting play at times for us at Georgia and Syracuse and other places, but not even getting off the bench and playing here. So a 7-man rotation. That makes Connie Ruths at 4K value in a forward slot there, 18 to 20 minutes. He had 21 fantasy points against Duke. That'll get it done, 10-6. Against Ole Miss, 6-3 for 12. So I'm definitely interested in him as what I'd say a lower end value, but it is against a UTEP team that he should be able to do some things. Rain Smith at 5'2", he's cheap. That's real cheap for him, playing 30-plus minutes, getting into the starting lineup due to all the injuries. He is mainly a shooter, so he's going to have to get hot to pay this price, but he definitely can. And then you've got the secondary looks, Terrence Edwards at 6K, Javon Hadley at 5'9", Noah Waterman at 5'5". We've seen Waterman be pretty damn chalky over the last week or two. I'm not really too interested in him as a chalkier piece. I do like him at 5'5", but he's really inconsistent. His scoring betrays him. He's just going to get even with the 7-man rotation, you see the shots aren't really coming there. Maybe more games without Pryor, we see him get more of the usage. But I would rather go up and play the guard forward of Terrence Edwards, who was such a stud for JMU in the past. He really looked good against Duke. He's been sleepwalking through these first few games, but against Duke, 30 minutes, 6 of 12 shooting, hit 3 threes, made 6 free throws, 21 real points. Peripheral's not that great, 2 rebounds, an assist, and 2 steals, but I do like him here against UTEP at 6K. There was another guy in that range today that I really liked, Bensley Joseph on Providence. Ended up lighter on him than I wanted to be, but it was a player that I talked about last night and mentioned today as well in the Discord. I feel like Edwards could be primed to have a game similar to Bensley Joseph here and maybe not have that much rostership when it's all said and done. James Scott still finding his way. We haven't seen the upside for him just yet. If you're a multi-enterer, I think you want to keep firing a bullet on James Scott. Trust me on this. He's going to have a really big game soon, and it could be this one right here. And then you have Chucky Hepburn at 8'7", a luxury play. We saw him put up some big numbers in the non-con tournament there. 46 against Indiana, 50 against West Virginia, another 33 against Oklahoma, just racking up steals in that tournament. Looks a little bit gassed here lately. Duke did a nice job. He shot 2 for 11 against them. He's expensive, but obviously going to be on the floor for 35, 36, maybe even longer. Don't hate it. On the UTEP side, we have playable options here. Louisville, to start the season, they had a really deep roster. I was like, damn, this is a really good team. They're going to have hockey-like shifts like Leonard Hamilton. And now it's a good thing they had all that depth because suddenly they don't have it. UTEP will be able to compete with them. UTEP is a higher tempo team, currently 102nd in tempo ranking. Defensively, they force a ton of turnovers. They are very, under Coach Joe Golding, aggressive. This is a team. Joe Golding, of course, he was the coach at Abilene Christian for a long time. Had that 24-5 season right after COVID. This is a really good coach who knows how to win games. So far, they have a nice win over UC Santa Barbara. You guys know I'm a big fan of the Big West. Wins over Long Beach State, UNC Greensboro, and Seattle. They also lost big time to Utah Valley. That was early in the season, and a close neutral court loss to San Jose State, which is a pretty decent San Jose State team. So this is a really good test. Probably the best, if looking at their non-con schedule, the best test they have here against Louisville at the Yum Center. The starting lineup that we'll typically see for the Miners will be Corey Camper, Otis Frazier, David Terrell, Kevin Kalu, and Devin Barnes. They also use a ton of Ahmad Bynum, who is the DePaul transfer, Trey Horton, KJ Thomas, and Dietrich Hamilton off the bench. So a little bit of a deeper team. They are led in usage by Derek Hamilton, 30.6%, 23.7% shot rate. He does come off the bench, and he just barely plays that 10 to 15-minute role, but he gets a ton of shots up and a lot of opportunities there. Be interesting to see if the minutes start to creep up for him at all with the way that he's playing. He is 5K, so we're not getting much of a discount there on DraftKings to be able to use him. If he was in the 3K, 3.5 range, I think he would be somewhat interesting. DK did do a pretty nice job of pricing these UTEP guys up. Otis Frazier, as the regulars of the starters, has the highest usage rate there of that group 24.8% usage rate, 25.7% shot rate, an assist rate of 25%, and a block rate of 5.4%. Those are two categories, assists and blocks, we don't see together very often, but Frazier, definitely a guy, and they run the offense through him. He does a lot of stuff at the high post there, getting entry passes at the free throw line, and the app operates as a quarterback of sorts. He's a little spendy at 7'9". If he can keep his fouls in check, I do think he has the opportunity to pay that tag off. Bynum at 6'1" would feel a little bit better if his minutes were more secured. He did start a game against Long Beach State during their non-conference tournament, but typically you're going to see him come off the bench. We'd like to see him play more. He does have a very good shot rate at 25%. Overall, shooting 59% from long range on 22 attempts. That's currently the third best mark in the country. So he's been the stones from long range, needs more attempts. But again, 6.1K, they've done a nice job. Some of these speculative UTEP minor plays that I'd be interested in, they're a little bit priced up and out for me. Corey Camper, same thing at 8K. You know, he's looking at probably 28 to 32 fantasy points, puts him right at value, but we can probably do just a little bit better there on that. And guys like Kalu, Terrell, Horton, all garnering 15 to 20 minutes as well, which just kind of muddies the waters a little bit. So UTEP has the opposite of a problem that Louisville has. They've got depth. They don't have injuries. They've got all their full arsenal ahead of them. I much prefer betting this game than I do playing too many options, at least from the UTEP side. I'm definitely on some Louisville guys, as mentioned, but UTEP plus 15 feels like the right side here. And then just to recap, as far as who I like the best, Terrence Edwards is my favorite. Connie Ruths, Rain Smith as value for Louisville. Next game here, Dartmouth versus Notre Dame. Some pretty smart schools, intelligent schools here. Notre Dame 18-point favorites, total of 140.5. Last time Notre Dame was on the slate, I was all over Tay Davis. So were the projections. He had a great opportunity against Syracuse and their fouling front court. He only played 19 minutes in that game because he got himself into early foul trouble, and you know what happens. Get those two early fouls, and I say it in the Discord every time. There is a 99.9999999% chance that he's going to pick up that early third foul after halftime. What happened? He got that third foul. Then there's a 99.99999% chance that when he comes back at the 12-minute mark, he'll get that fourth foul. What happened? He got that fourth foul. So he played 19 minutes. We've seen it happen for a decade now. We know 24 fantasy points in that time. If he would have gotten closer to 30 as we had projected him, he would have been a slate breaker in that one against Syracuse. Now he gets a do-over here against Dartmouth. They're big-time favorites. I mean, look at what Tay Davis has been doing. You know, this is his junior year now. We saw it early in his career. He had some upside. He showed flashes, nothing consistent. Now that they have Burton on the shelf, their best player, Davis has become the de facto alpha for them. He's facilitating on offense. He had 5 assists against Creighton. He had 4 against Houston, had a couple against Syracuse. Rebounding numbers are going to be there, and he scored 15, 14, 17, 22, and 15 real points in each of his last 5 games. He is priced up at 7.5, which I think keeps his ownership down. I like that. I'm a big proponent of using Tay Davis. If he gets into foul trouble again, so be it. But this is a spot here against Dartmouth that he should be able to do some serious damage against. Dartmouth is 74th in tempo. They play a very fast pace under Coach Dave McLaughlin in the Ivy. Offensive efficiency near the bottom of all of college basketball at 348. And then their defensive efficiency in the middle of the pack at 239. One of the worst offensive rebounding teams in the country. They do a nice job defensive rebounding. They can't shoot for shit, for lack of a better term. They can't rebound very well. There are a lot of one-and-done situations. They get their shots blocked when they try to drive. They turn it over. There's just some great opportunities here for our guy, Tay Davis, and other options on Notre Dame to have a big game. So it starts for me with Tay Davis at 7.5. You have Braden Shrewsbury. His price has been slowly creeping up. High usage guy playing just about every single minute. Without Burton, he is getting every shot he wants. He doesn't get peripherals. We know that. If he gets you a rebound or 2, an assist and a steal, you're feeling pretty good. More often than not, he's giving you 1 rebound, 1 assist, and 20 points. Still relatively cheap at 7-1 for what he's going to do and how many minutes he's going to get in this game. But I do prefer Tay Davis for what it's worth. Mataloco's there at 6K. When the first game that Burton got hurt, was it against Rutgers? He put up nearly 50. Had to kind of caution everybody, like, he's not that guy. He had a nice game. He was hitting a bunch of threes. He grabbed every rebound in existence. He's put up pretty good rebounding numbers since, but he's not a guy that's putting up 20-plus real points very often. So at 6K, I'm not there with him, but I do think he gets pretty solid peripheral stats. This is one of those situations where you put his rebounding assist numbers with Shrewsbury's scoring numbers, and you would have one hell of a player there. Keba Njai at 5'2". He's another guy that fouls a bunch. He benefited last game against Syracuse with the Tay Davis foul trouble. He got 28 minutes there, 9 points, 9 rebounds, a block, and assist. He had 23 fantasy points. Those numbers would have gone towards Tay Davis's, total. So Keba definitely benefited. J.R. Coe, he has the hardest last name to say, so I'm just going to say J.R. Coe. He played 29 minutes against Syracuse at 3.8K. I'm gun shy on him because we saw Logan Imes for Notre Dame a couple of weeks ago during that Burton injury come out and play 30 minutes plus against Rutgers and another 30 minutes against Houston. Put up 14 and 12 fantasy points, basically min price, good numbers, but he's played 12, 5, and 11 since. Bounced out of the starting lineup, J.R. Coe into the starting lineup, playing 30 minutes. If you can sit here and tell me as a starter he's going to play 30 minutes again against a Dartmouth team, I'm interested. Another guy that's not going to give us, Notre Dame's filled with guys that aren't going to give us a ton of peripherals, but he can score. He can hit threes at 3.8. It's just hard for me to sit here and say for sure he's going to play those kind of minutes. I don't mind rostering him if he does start as a value piece that gets us to other spots. You just have to be ready for a possible 1x, 2x return on that 3.8 price. As long as we can make it up somewhere else, we're okay, though. So there's that. Julian Roper's there at 3.3. He's a little more steady and stable. He doesn't have any upside, but the floor won't bottom out like it will with J.R. Coe. And then you have a lot of secondary options who have shown, in spurts. Burke Chebuhar against Rutgers, he was incredible, has done nothing since. Nikita Konstantinovsky, he had a pretty nice outing against Georgia. He's done nothing before or since. A lot of cheapies. For me, I think Tay Davis is just going to roll hard here. This is a 40-point fantasy game for Tay Davis. I really, truly believe that. Early look at I was actually working on this sheet before we started. So 34 minutes for Tay Davis. We're right around 35 fantasy points, 4.61x. May get a little bit less if this game gets out of hand, but no, it's not like Notre Dame has anyone they can really turn to. As long as he doesn't get into foul trouble, mid-30s minutes, I think is a mortal lock for Tay Davis. And I really don't know that people are going to be rostering him at 7.5. I think there's this preconceived notion that he's a role player. People aren't used to seeing him take over as an alpha. I don't think many people outside of really the sickest of all the community like ourselves watch Notre Dame games or their fans. And hell, their fans probably aren't watching too many of their games either. They're still in football mode, right? So I really love this spot for Tay Davis. I want to declare him as the posh play of the day. But we'll see. We'll see if we get closer to lock, if there's more people that start waking up to that. But this is just such a great, great matchup for him. I hope he doesn't do anything stupid like pick up 2 early fouls. On the Dartmouth side, there is some viability here. The early projection sheet stuff loves the big green of Dartmouth. Ken Palm has this one 79-61, by the way. So 61 points, not great of a projection, but we know where the production is going to come from when it comes to this Dartmouth team. The starting lineup they will typically run, and it's the last 3 games they haven't started their best player, Ryan Cornish, but I consider him like a 6th starter. We're likely to see Romeo Mirthel, Brandon Mitchell-Day, Cade Haskins, Connor Amundsen, who is a Mighty Mouse type freshman, very exciting player, and Jaden Williams. And then off the bench, we've been seeing Ryan Cornish, but he's playing 30-plus minutes off the bench. So he's still getting those starter minutes, whether he starts or not. And then Connor Christensen as the second piece. So about a 7 to 8 man rotation for Dartmouth. Cornish leads the team in usage at 28.6% and shot rate at 27.3%. He has a defensive rebounding rate of 17%, an assist rate of 23.8%, a steal rate of 4.3%, and he's drawing 6.4 fouls per 40, shooting roughly 35 to 36% from long range. He isn't cheap at 7.4. That's enough, I think, to push people away, especially since he hasn't started the last 3 games. Typically starts every single game for this team and has for a while. Off the bench against BC, 30 fantasy points. Off the bench against New Hampshire, 37 fantasy points. Off the bench against Illinois Chicago, 34.5 fantasy points. The dude has just got an endless amount of range, every shot that he could possibly want, and he does rebound. He does get assists. He does defend well. He has 8 steals in his past 2 games. I'm a big Ryan Cornish fan here, and I think he's very sneaky there at the 7.4 price because a lot of people are going to be gun shy about the fact that he isn't starting, and it's almost better that he isn't. If he gets back into the starting lineup, he'll probably draw some ownership, but the fact that he, likely coming off the bench is going to make most people overlook him because I got to be honest, people aren't watching Dartmouth basketball. I got to be honest, I'm not watching it either. I've watched one of their games on stream so far this year, and that was the game against BC. I don't think we're dealing with a team that many people are going to know anything about. And they beat Boston College, by the way, 88-83. That was a pretty fun game to watch. It was at the Connie Forum, BC's home. And in that one, it was just a Ryan Cornish party. Kate Haskins was knocking down a bunch of threes. Basically, Dartmouth shot almost 60% from long range on 30-plus attempts. And they ended up stealing that one here. So I do think they'll be close here against Notre Dame. Obviously, we'll have to shoot well, but Ryan Cornish at 7.4, another sneaky option. I think we got 2 in this game. We could roll Cornish with Tay Davis and I think have, a combined sub 20% ownership on both. And they can put us in a very, very good position here in the early window. Haskins there at 5'9", definitely an option. A Fowler, to be clear, if he can stay on the floor, I think he puts up a big number, but I don't have any faith that he will. At 5.7, Romeo Mirthil, another guy taking a ton of shots lately. He's pretty safe, floor of about 20 to 22 fantasy points, not a ton of upside there to be certain. Connor Amundsen at 5.2K, getting into the starting lineup there. He played 36 minutes against BC, 28 and 26 over his last 3. But he has been playing pretty solidly 30-plus minutes. So at 5.2, I definitely like him to a degree. He doesn't have the impressive stats. He's still only a freshman. Will be taking over the reins of this offense next year, but playing the most minutes on the team at 77%. Does draw about 3.5 fouls per 40. Has one of the highest free throw rates on the team. Only a 26% three-point shooter, but improving with each game when you look at what he's been doing. So certainly is in play there. I like some exposure to Dartmouth. Whenever Notre Dame is on the slate, I like to target against them. Their games, they tend to be pretty fantasy friendly. I could see this one going sideways, and that'll be somebody that nobody uses, like a Mitchell Day, but certainly one we want to look to. All right, moving on to the next game, we have Fairleigh Dickinson versus Villanova. Villanova 29-point favorites. No way are they beating them by 29, and a total of 151. I just have no faith in Villanova whatsoever. I'll be interested to hear what Mike Randall, one of our chief content officers and betting extraordinaire, has to say about this one. Ken Palm has it's 90-64. Villanova under Kyle Neptune. They have had their struggles. They're 6-4 this year. Losses against Columbia, St. Joseph's, which isn't a very good loss, Virginia, which certainly isn't a very good loss, and Maryland. Maryland's awesome this year. 3 straight, though, they've won against Rider, Cincinnati, and Temple. The home wins against Cincinnati and Temple are huge. Cincinnati turning out to maybe be a little fraudulent here because they haven't played anyone. They did beat the doors off Georgia Tech, but they look like they're taking a huge step back this year. That was a bad loss for Cincy. Should turn into a very good win on the Villanova. And I'm very I like Fairleigh Dickinson. Let's just put it that way. I'm very intrigued. Anytime Villanova is going to be a big favorite, which I don't think happens very often after this Fairleigh Dickinson game because they're going right into conference play next Tuesday, Seton Hall, next Saturday, Creighton. Like they're in the conference schedule. They're not going to be 30-point favorites against anyone else. They do have Eric Dixon, who has just been absolutely phenomenal. 7th in the KenPom Player of the Year ranking so far. 53rd in offensive rating across the country, 20th highest usage rate at 32.4%, 14th highest shot rate at 35.3%, top 100 in true shooting percentages, offensive rebounding rate of 11%, combined rebounding rate over 24%, draws 5 fouls per 40, and he's shooting 54% from long range on volume, 61 attempts. Like, he is single-handedly carrying the carcass of this Villanova team. He's extraordinarily expensive at 9.5, but he just continues to get it done. And it would have been, last year if you told me, hey, approximately 6 to 7 weeks into the season next year, you're going to consider and probably lock in Eric Dixon at 9.5. And I would have said, hell no. Whatever you're on, I want some, because there's no way I would ever pay that price for Eric Dixon. He did have a pretty strong year last year, but what he's doing right now is nothing short of amazing, averaging over 40 DK points per game. He's just the only show in town. You'll see Jameer Brickus do some things. You'll see Longino, Wooga Poplar. But Dixon, man, he has just got such crazy usage every single game. 23 shots he got up against Cincinnati, 29 shots he got up against Maryland, 11 threes. This dude's just a sicko. So you got to consider playing him at 9.5. When you look at the various pay-ups here, you've got the Pittsburgh guards, Leggett and Lowe, who have been a bit of a tilt. You've got the Cal Baptist Dom Daniels, who was very good in their last time they were on the slate, but playing against a tough San Diego State. Chucky Hepburn's a little expensive. Zuby, we always like Zuby. That'll be a decision you'll have to make. And then you really have RJ Lewis, and then Eric Dixon, who's the most expensive player on the slate at 9.5. I think I can get behind playing Eric Dixon. As for the rest of Villanova, Jameer Brickus, he was really good at LaSalle. He's been steady here, 6'4". It's fine. It's a good matchup against FDU on paper. Wooga Poplar there at 6'3". We know he can bang. He scored 26-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 5. Showed major flashes at times at Miami, so if they can get him going consistently, maybe Villanova can be halfway decent. Jordan Longino is getting a lot of minutes there at 5'7", but not a lot of upside. And then the Ivy transfer Tyler Perkins, just not getting enough minutes consistently. He goes from one of the higher usage players in the conference that he last year to a 7th option at best. That's a big adjustment for a player. As a freshman at Penn, like, he was one of the best, probably top 8 to 9 players in the Ivy. So a little bit of an adjustment there for him, but a bunch of seniors around him. So he will step up and assuming that they don't fire Kyle Neptune, maybe he'll be around, but if they do, then he'll probably transfer again. But I digress. Really on this team, it's Dixon or bust. If you believe they'll blow the doors off of FDU by 30+, then you can start to look at players like Enoch Bokai at 5'5". Maybe he gets a little bit of extra minutes. I know he's been starting out there, but maybe some more opportunities for him. A player like Josiah Mosley, who played 18 minutes in the blowout over Temple, got about 11 fantasy points. Not a lot of excitement there. Really is Dixon or bust for me. Now on the Fairleigh Dickinson side, that's where it gets a little more intriguing. Very slow pace that Villanova plays. FDU, the top 40 in tempo, so they're Villanova getting a huge tempo boost. Slowing down against FDU, that's not great for them. They do have one of the worst defensive efficiencies in the country at 357, 281st in offensive efficiency. They don't rebound particularly well. That's where Bokai maybe comes into play there with the rebounding upside. But there is absolutely some fantasy goodness to be had here for this FDU team. And I think that we could see a situation where Eric Dixon battles all night with FDU's Terrence Brown, and they just trade bucket after bucket. Different positions, but those are the offensive leaders on this team. Now, Brown's only a sophomore. The way he is playing this year, he's definitely going to be on the radar of P5 teams next year in the transfer portal. As a freshman, he didn't start right away, but it was obvious that he was one of their better players, got himself into the starting lineup from January on, and he was one of their key pieces. Now, the team is only 4-7 this year. Some pretty tough losses thus far. Doors blown off by Creighton, Miami, a really bad Miami team, Nebraska, Army, but close losses against teams like Fairfield, St. Peter's, Fordham. I just feel like they're going to be able to do enough to at least keep this one comfortable, competitive, under 30 points for a little while. Terrence Brown, can't talk enough about how great he is. 87% of the minutes, top 60 in the country. He's playing a lot. 45th highest usage rate in the country, 26th highest shot rate. Has a 33.8% shot rate, 17.1% defensive rebounding rate, draws about 5 fouls per 40. Getting to the line in this one will be crucial. Only about 32% from long range, needs to work on that. But definitely a guy who, when you think of those players who lead those low and mid-major teams and where DK normally prices them for these guys who are putting up these big scoring numbers, these big fantasy numbers, you think Robert McRae of Jacksonville, 8K plus. LaSalle, Corey McKeithen, 8K plus. Like all these players typically at worst, or at best are getting to be priced at 8K. We're getting Terrence Brown priced at a very, very reasonable 6.7K. Now, I don't think it'll come as any surprise to people. I don't think we'll get him at like 1%, 5%. Maybe we get him under 20. But game logs chasers are going to zero in on him because he is priced at 6.7, and they're going to see a 50. They're going to see several times where he's put up 40 plus and he's put up 30 plus on 7 different occasions. He is the all everything for this team. 23 shot attempts against Fordham. That was great. He gets to the rack often. He's constantly and relentlessly attacking the rim. He doesn't rely solely on shooting the three like others, and that's why he gets so many free throws. The other thing is he has a crazy high steal rate, over 3% at this point. He is racking up stocks. He is racking up assists. He is racking up rebounds. He is just the total package. I'm expected to believe that Villanova, a team that has given up a ton of fantasy goodness to other opponents, weak or not, is going to be able to key in and lock down Terrence Brown. I don't buy it. I don't think so. If he was priced at 9K, like he probably should be, then I might be like, can we get away with taking him at that price if Fairleigh Dickinson only puts up, 55, 60 points. Let's go back and look at some of the teams he played early in the season, the Miamis, the Creightons. 31 minutes in a blowout loss against Miami, 18-4-2 was good for 26. At 6'7", we can easily take a 26 and feel okay. Creighton in a 96-70 loss in 30 minutes, he had 19 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 33.5 fantasy points, 33.5 at 6'7". We're ecstatic. Against Nebraska in an 86-60 blowout loss, 35 minutes, 23 points, 8 rebounds, and assists, had 3 steals, 39.5 fantasy points. At 40 at 6'7", not only are we ecstatic, but we are, Frank the Tank streaking down the street, especially if the industry hands him over to us at a sub 10% ownership. Cannot say enough about Terrence Brown. He is the easiest play on the slate for me at that price point against Villanova. We're not talking about Houston here. We're not talking about San Diego State. We're not talking about Tennessee. Villanova. Come on. As far as anybody else on Fairleigh Dickinson, he's just so cheap, it doesn't even really make sense to go anywhere else. Dylan Jones at 4.7 also makes a lot of sense as a key piece to the puzzle here. Somebody who is getting a ton of minutes and can easily push past 4x. 19% shot rate, has pretty solid top 250 numbers when it comes to effective field goal percentage and true shooting, and he's the best three-point shooter on the team at 40%, and that is on volume at 55 attempts. He is a starter. Definitely not looking at stacking FDU by any means, but you could get away with playing Brown and Dylan Jones for really cheap and feel damn good about it. The other starters on the team, they're all cheap. Joel Emmanuel Dylan Jones, Ahmed Barbet, Cameron Tweedy, and Terrence Brown. Would really only play Brown or Jones. You can look to Joel Emmanuel, who's also basically going to play 38 plus minutes the entire game as well. Doesn't have the same rates of those other guys, but he is going to be out there. And price-wise, it's a agreeable, affordable, okay GPP type of look at 6.2K. I love the idea of playing Eric Dixon and Terrence Brown here, though. I think they could easily battle back and forth, bucket for bucket. FDU plus 29 is it's just the bet of the day. I'm really going to be interested to see where Randall is on that one, but it is the bet of the day. Hey, my man. FDU has the posh. 6,700 is the nut. Yeah. I'm probably like wishful thinking that he's not going to be super chalky, but yeah, he is fun to watch. I have watched several Fairleigh Dickinson games for him. I am in several dynasty leagues, and he is a player that in those deeper leagues I have gone after quite a bit. So big fan there. All right, Eastern Kentucky versus Pittsburgh. Moving on to this game. EKU, deep team, not really super fond of I mean, it's nice to have them on. I like my mid and low majors, but I think this could get rough for them. This is one where I think, Pittsburgh 17.5, which is a huge spread, I think is actually in play. Total of 149.5. Starting with the Pittsburgh side, we had, some love affairs, as the industry did, with Guillermo Diaz-Graham. He's pretty cheap at 5.3K, played 31 minutes against Virginia Tech, had the injury against Mississippi State, which knocked him out. Or actually I think that was against OSU during that one. But now it looks like he's shaking that off. He's going to be fine, playing full minutes, probably back into starter minutes consistently. Certainly worth a look there at the 5.3 price point. I do think he'll be relatively popular. He is one that I do get a little antsy with, but hard to argue that price for him. Then you have the decision point of Ish Leggett and Jalan Lowe, both up there over 9K. It's been a bit of a tilt for me personally this season, and talking to others, it sounds like the same. You play low, they play the one, they'll give you 30, but then the other one goes for 40 plus. So you play low, Leggett goes for 40, 50. You play Leggett, low goes for 40 or 50. That's happened the last couple of times with Leggett. Both are extremely great plays here against EKU. We have the value in some of the underpriced options that we're going to work our way through here to be able to fit in Dixon, one of the Pittsburgh guys, if we want to. You also have Cam Corhen, who at 6K is a lot more playable than most probably realize. He was really good against Virginia Tech. He has dealt with foul issues, especially first half foul trouble. That has been a big time Achilles heel for him. But without foul trouble, this is a guy getting 30 plus minutes, and I don't think people really understand how valuable of a fantasy option he really is, especially in a matchup here against Eastern Kentucky that he can do really well against. He kind of controls that if he wants to get handsy or not. Eastern Kentucky, not the best rebounding team in the world, as you can imagine as an ASUN team. They're near the bottom of college basketball when it comes to defensive rebounding rate. And defensively, in general, they're just not very good. So this should be a Cam Corhen type of game. Looking at Corhen's overall rates, 8.8% offensive rebounding rate, combined rate over 20%, and a block rate nearing 3.5%. With Guillermo Diaz-Graham healthy, Corhen's, competing a little bit there on the front court, but Graham tends to be a little more of a finesse player a lot, and Corhen more of a banger. So I like Corhen at 6K, not as a main team play, but as a kind of a GPP look there. And then you also have Zach Austin at 5.8, who saw the minute spike with several guys banged up. Not really a consistent option, but 5.8 is definitely a playable look there, maybe as in last guy in type. On the Eastern Kentucky side, you've got some expensive guys here. So this is more in line with what you would expected for Terrence Brown. You have a 8.4K price for George Kimball. Look through his logs, very similar to Terrence Brown. Don't think I could get there he does have an extremely high usage rate, 31.3%, extremely high shot rate at 28.4%. His assist rate is 28.3%, and he has a ridiculously high steal rate, which is approaching 6%. It's the 7th highest steal rate in the entire world, college basketball world. And then you have Devontae Blanton, who has been around for a long time. This is year 5 due to the COVID year that he was able to get. He started just during COVID, which allowed him the extra year. He's fairly priced for where you would expect. He's been the alpha on this team at 7.8K. Now he's more of the secondary option behind Kimball. Certainly in play. I think Blanton and Kimball are both two guys who will be extremely low owned on this slate. So multi-enters will want to get exposure there for sure. This is one of those spots where, nobody's on them and Blanton racks up steals, or Kimball gets, 8 threes and they break the slate with nobody on them. So you want to definitely get exposure there. Very dangerous plays though, when it comes to single entry. As far as the starting lineup for EKU, we'll run through that real quick. In addition to Blanton and Kimball, it's typically Evans Paul, Meyer Wall, and Jordan Crawford. Jordan Crawford has to be one of the most common names in college basketball and basketball in general, right? Off the bench, Montavious Myrick, Turner Buttery, and Jackson Holt. They typically run about a 9 to 10 man rotation though. So outside of Kimball and Blanton, it does get a little bit dicey, and that is reflected in the pricing. I do think Pittsburgh beats EKU by 20 plus. So not much of a proponent for taking large spreads like that, but I do think Pittsburgh minus 17.5 is the correct side here. You have several options with Graham, Corhin, Leggett, and Lowe. On to the next one, Colgate versus Kentucky. This isn't the Colgate team that we've kind of got accustomed to over the last few years, where they're beating Syracuse every season. A ton of players from those great teams have graduated. They also lost Braden Smith, who transferred to Gonzaga. Not that Braden Smith, but that Braden Smith, and taking a red shirt. So they're just, it's a rough one for Colgate this year. They're 30-point dogs against Kentucky, total of 157.5. We certainly want to be all over Kentucky in this one. Much like Dartmouth, this is a great matchup for Kentucky, as you can imagine. Colgate's very low end when it comes to defensive and offensive efficiency. They are one of, if not the worst offensive rebounding team in the country. They don't love it, but they seem like they love getting their shot blocked at a very high rate. They can't do anything to defend the three. They just don't do much well. And we're not used to that because Colgate has been so good under Matt Langel. This Colgate team has been competitive. We've seen them in the tournament. We've seen them push Arkansas. We've seen them beat Syracuse several times over the last few years, but they have just been gutted. And that's unfortunate because we're used to seeing them be very good. But the names that you're used to seeing on Colgate the last couple of years are just not there anymore, right? Keegan Records, who had been there for a million years, out of eligibility. Ryan Moffitt, who had been there for a million years, out of eligibility. Braden Smith, mentioned, he went to Gonzaga. So they just don't have those guys anymore. We want to be heavy on Kentucky. Kentucky, typically a deep team, but they have injuries galore. Kirk Kriisa is the latest, who is going to be out for quite a while, possibly the rest of the season. They're not ready to say that yet, but is going to have surgery on his foot in the game against Gonzaga, which he's playing pretty damn well against them. He was a big part of that comeback. He is going to be out. So that's about 18 to 20 minutes to go around. We saw Lamont Butler, even more impressive about that Kentucky win. Lamont Butler didn't play. He's been a key piece for them, right? Transferring from SDSU. We'll see. He's considered day-to-day with the ankle. I do think he will play, but I think he's going to be relatively limited. They aren't going to need him against Colgate. I think, they could even sit him if they wanted to and get away with it, but I think it makes sense to try to get him some game action as best they can. I don't think this turns into a VJ Edgecombe situation where we thought Edgecombe was going to be eased in and he just suddenly played 38 minutes and went nuts, played better than he's ever played. But I think Butler does play, but on a limited basis. So that leaves us with a ton of options to look at. Jackson Robinson at 6'2" is arguably the safest guard to use. And he was so good against Gonzaga. Made a lot of key passes, racking up assists. He was hitting key shots. Jackson is honestly, to me, the best player on Kentucky and the most important piece. I think as we get into closer games here for Kentucky, we're going to see him perform more like an 8K price type of player. And until he gets priced up there, we have to continue to roll him out, in my opinion. I got to love Andrew Carr. I think Amari Williams also a great play. Like, the rebounds are going to be there for Kentucky all game long. Amari Williams at 7'7". He actually projects well on the sheet, but the minutes are typically capped. We saw him play 28 against Clemson in that close loss. We saw him play 26 in the close win over Gonzaga. But in those blowout games, we saw him pretty much maxed at 20. And he's priced at nearly 8K, so a little bit harder to get to him. I think he can put up 30 in 20 minutes. I think he will. But I'm going to be looking to some of the other options for a discount. Guys like Andrew Carr, who are huge against Gonzaga. And then you turn around and look at what he did in blowout wins like against Western Kentucky, 39 fantasy points. Georgia State, 31 fantasy points. Andrew Carr, and we get him 1K cheaper. So really like Andrew Carr. With the injuries and the shorthanded status that they're going to be, we also want to look at Brandon Garrison. He's 4.7K. Definitely one of the better values on the first look. I project him for about 20-ish minutes. And he's well overvalued there at 4.7 against a very good Gonzaga team. He put up 24, 9 rebounds, a block, assist, and also knocked down a 3 and put up 10 points. Don't typically see him knocking down threes, but he's very, very comfortable. And then you get a bit of upside there. Go back to the blowout win over Jacksonville State back in the end of November. Only 6 real points, but he had 36 fantasy points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 blocks, 3 steals. Like, he could certainly do that here against this Colgate team, and he played 23 minutes. At 20 minutes, he's just such a banger value play. Not going to sit here and tell you he's putting up 40, but I do think he's sailing over 20 fantasy points at 4.7. And you get a forward value, which this has been the year of the forward. To make it clear, more forwards have been playable this year than I think any year that I can remember. But it's nice to have a value there nonetheless. You can also get a little bit cute there in your GPP builds, alt builds with Ansley Almanar, who probably looking at closer to 15 minutes here. Some blowout run can definitely pay off that 4.1 price tag. But love Garrison, love Jackson Robinson, love Andrew Carr. Mari Williams, more of a luxury play to me. Otega Awi, 7K. It's fair for him. You see, he's pretty steady, but the upside hasn't been there. And then you have to consider Kobe Brea at 5'4". Could see him unleash a little bit like Bensley Joseph did today in that mid 5K range. Played 31 real solid minutes against Gonzaga. It's more defensive purposes there. You're used to seeing him just be a 3-point specialist, which he has been most of the season, but he did step up defensively against Gonzaga, and that earned him minutes. About 20 to 25 minutes here, but without Kriisa, expect that to bump up. And maybe if he does play closer to 30 here against an inferior Colgate team, people are going to overlook Kobe Brea. He was an important transfer ad for them. One of the best ones that they were talking about, or coming into the season, one of the more important ones that they talked about. Low ownership there for Brea. Kentucky stack all the way. I think you can utilize him for sure. Carr and Garrison are my favorite two. Jackson Robinson. I don't know that I'll run 3 in that main lineup, but I'm definitely running 2 of the 3 from Carr, Robinson, and Garrison. Haven't quite decided if it's going to be Robinson or Carr, but definitely Brandon Garrison. On the Colgate side, the alpha is currently Jalen Cox, 25.9% usage rate. Awful 3-point shooter so far, but a 22.7% defensive rebounding rate, a 27% assist rate, and a 3.5% steal rate. Priced fairly at 5.5K. You know, I'm not really keen on taking any of the Colgate guys. There are situations against harder teams where we see guys step up and pay off, against Duke, against Kentucky, against these harder teams. I don't think Colgate has a lot of success putting the ball in the basket this time. Brady Cummins at 4.9. Perhaps if this was the game they were playing Syracuse, I could maybe sell that one a little bit more. He had a big game against Syracuse, 31 fantasy points. But I think this is a real tough spot to get behind any of the Colgate guys. You do have some interesting values, guys like Nicolas Louis-Jacques, who are going to play 28 plus minutes and are priced only at 4.2. Maybe they can eke out that 15 to 16 fantasy point number. You also have a 4.8K price Parker Jones, who's playing starter level minutes 30 plus. People look at his log, see he's putting up close to a 3x number at this price point. So you have some guys, but I'm certainly not comfortable or confident in any of them actually panning out, especially when we have Garrison on the other side at the same exact price of 4.7K. All right, rounding into the night window. Fresno State versus BYU. Can I just say for BYU for a second, holy shit. Let's just talk about it for a minute. They have a lot of, we're in the NIL era, so a lot of people said, oh, this is the end of mid-major basketball. The low majors can't compete. All the Alabamas, the Kentuckys, the Dukes, they're just going to buy all the best players, and that's going to be that. And we're going to have a competitive imbalance in college basketball. And college basketball is effectively over. The doomsday sayers, they're always going to be there. Everything's always the worst. But that just hasn't happened. We had the most competitive and college football season in a long time, right? Anybody could truly beat anybody. Oregon is undefeated, but there's several games they played where they could have easily lost, right? They haven't looked like some dominant undefeated team that just can't be beaten. That's simply not the case. We are seeing lower major schools, mid-major schools go up to the P5, P4 level and get guys who aren't playing. They have that talent. Hey, come to our school, you can play, and we got a little bit of money for you, right? We're also seeing schools like BYU who have the Church of Latter-day Saints backing their collective, and there is a lot of money in the religious grounds, right? And they have seemingly, the rumors of what the war chest has for the BYU collective is obscene amount of money. And AJ DeBensta, who is the number one recruit for next year, legitimately a number one draft pick, like right now. If you come out of high school, like I think he would be the number one pick over Cooper Flagg. As excited about Cooper Flagg that people are, there's been a lot of media that has been pulled and asked about, hey, AJ versus Cooper, who would you take? And a large portion of them have said AJ DeBensta. Anyhow, BYU lands the number one recruit in the country. Kid has like amazing moxie, well liked, already has deals with Red Bull and Nike waiting. I don't know how many of you got to watch his announcement on ESPN this morning or any of his other commercials that he's done, the Red Bull thing from yesterday. He has a ton of charisma, and it's easy to like guys like that. And it's easy when you're a great scorer and basketball player like him to get paid when you have that kind of charisma, that kind of skill set. And the rumored NIL number is $7 million, which, is a lot of money to play college basketball. We know Great Osabor got $2 million from my Huskies. We know Coleman Hawkins got a huge number, $1 million plus from Kansas State. But that just shows you guys who, Washington, as much as I'd like to sit here and pretend that they're the best basketball team in the world, we know they're not. They're landing Great Osabor. Kansas State's landing Coleman Hawkins, and now BYU's landing AJ DeBensta. And these are a lot of money going to these kids, and they're going to teams that aren't Alabama, that aren't Duke, that aren't North Carolina. They're going to other teams. So just wanted to harp on that for a minute. BYU is going to be really good. They have the ability, if they bring Igor Demon back, who is the international kid, if he doesn't go pro after this year, I think there's a good chance he comes back. Like, they're going to have a sicko roster. It obviously helps that BYU's in the Big 12 now, but holy shit, that was a big thing to wake up to this morning. I couldn't believe it. Like, I had an inkling that he might go to BYU, but just to really see it and happen was insane. Anyways, BYU versus Fresno State. They're going to be riding the high of that. They are 28-point favorites against Fresno State. Fresno State has some dudes. They're young, though, and their best players are all freshmen, so it's going to take some time. Total of 155.5. Certainly want to get some exposure here to BYU. They do project extremely well. Ken Palm has it 88 to 66. Starts off with Igor Demon, who is just an absolute stud. Plays, multiple positions, damn near 6'10". Can run the point, can do a lot of things. He's priced at 7.5. He's going through a little bit of freshman struggles. To start the season, he was putting up huge numbers against inferior competition. He's had a string of games, Ole Miss, NC State, Providence, where he's gotten, beat up, banged around, physicaled. It's been rattling him a little bit. If you watched any of those games, you see they did a nice job rattling him. Fresno State won't do that, so I do think this is a game where he puts up a ridiculous 40-plus fantasy point number. So I do like Igor at 7.5. Almost like don't even need to go up and pay for the Pittsburgh guards because I think Igor can match or exceed for cheaper. Looking at Fousseyni Traore, who mostly comes off the bench but has incredible rates. Offensive rating, 13th best in the country, 25% usage rate, a combined rebounding rate over 40%. He's the top 15 offensive rebounding percentage, draws 4.5 fouls per 40, does get called for 4 per 40, which definitely hurts, but has a 6% block rate. When he's on the floor, his fantasy point per minute number is insane. Lately, he's had some trouble, especially in the first half, staying on the floor. And it's always a risk playing a guy who is expensive. He's cheaper now at 6'1" than he was a couple of weeks ago at 7'5". But it's always a risk playing a guy like that who's coming off the bench already. And if he does get those 2 quick fouls, you're seeing an even bigger reduction in minutes because he's missing the first 5 to 8 minutes of the game coming off the bench. Then he comes in, picks up the 2 fouls. Then you're looking at a situation where he's playing 5 minutes in the first half. So he is more of a GPP look normally, but the Fresno State team is not going to have the physicality to push him around. He is only 6'7", so it's not as if he's some kind of giant, but he's a very strong, very physical guy. This is not a finesse type of player. He doesn't shoot threes. He just bangs down low, and he's very, very good at it. Rounding out the other BYU options, the starting lineup outside of Igor, Keba Keita, Cannon Catchings, Richie Saunders, and Dallin Hall. Catchings, another freshman there who has been solid, a bit of a three-point specialist. He's also a pretty athletic shot blocker when he wants to be. Staying engaged as a freshman has been a pretty tough thing for him. We've seen him really, really dialed in some games, and then like the NC State game, he's just standing in the corner. Doesn't look like he really wants to be there. He is an interesting price at 5.8K, more of a secondary choice to me. Richie Saunders is there at 6'9", a little bit expensive. I know he put up a 50 against Idaho like a month ago, but that's too expensive for Saunders. Keba Keita came over from Utah, another fantasy point per minute monster. Keita is a kind of a poor man's Fousseyni Traore in that regard, but he's been very solid. 3 of his last 5 over 22 fantasy points. Stuck at about 20 minutes, but he does a lot in those 20 minutes, and he can pay off this 6.1K price point. Pulling up some of his efficiency stuff. Highest defensive rebounding rate in the country at 38.6%. 8th highest defensive or offensive rebounding rate at 18.7%. Those are amazing numbers because of the minutes that he plays. 5% block rate, draws 5.3 fouls per 40, and has a relatively high offensive rating in the top 350 range. He goes so hard when he's on the floor, and that might be a big reason why he can't play more than 20 minutes. But you're talking about a guy, 10 rebounds in 21 minutes, 9 rebounds in 22 minutes, 13 rebounds in 19 minutes. He's just all over it. Gets the ball whenever he's out there. Would like him to be a little bit cheaper, but he's certainly playable at 6'1". I do think Traore's upside higher here in this spot, but I might trust Keita just a little bit more at the same price. As far as the rest, Trevin Nell at 5.5. It always seems like a decent price for Nell and Dallin Hall, who's now finally healthy, of sound mind, at 5.3 as well. But they're just, secondary options. I wouldn't even call it a buy low for them. I think that's just the price that they belong at. So we're not getting any of this, last year Dallin Hall performing like a 7K player. Oh, he's 5'3", got to play him. Not really there with him, but as a last man in, I certainly don't hate it. On the Fresno State side, you've got the two younger players here, Zion Collins and the freshman Michael Robinson. Robinson priced at 6'5", Collins at 7'3". You have the other younger freshman Elijah Price, who is priced at 6'4". Those have been the three best players on the team. Like I said, Fresno State is an extremely young squad, but all three of those guys have shown a really high upside. They're going to be very good in the future. It's just going to take time for that group to kind of gel together. Mike Hill came over from I know I just called him a freshman, but he came over from the JUCO level. Still has 2 years left. Price, very, very sound shot blocker, great rebounder, has a high foul rate, has to figure some things out, go through those growing pains. And then Collins, more of a table setter, can get buckets, not a great three-point shooter, but plays a ton of minutes. So I like the Fresno State side ordinarily, but it's hard to trust them here in the spot on the road against BYU. I've been taking the props on Collins, especially his assist number lately. So we'll look and see what that is. He's priced at 7'3". Definitely a playable GPP look there. Michael Robinson at 6'5". Probably the most viable option. You've seen he's played 36, 38, 47, and 35 minutes each of his last four. Not as much of a fouler. I do think he could actually have some success drawing fouls on the other side against BYU, and he's playing a tremendous amount of minutes. You look at how deep Fresno State's rotation has been. Mike Hill's managed to play 87.3% of the available minutes, which is 56th most in the country. So he's going to be out there, come hell or high water. He's going to play a lot. And I think that price is definitely viable for him there at 6'5" and as a forward, which you might notice there's a lot of viable forwards once again. Highest usage, highest shot rate on the team is Amar Aguilar, who is priced at 5.1K. He is a bit handsy and gets into foul trouble, especially against upper tier competition. So he's a little bit untrustworthy here, but he will jack up shots. Against a very tough SDSU team, Fresno State got their absolute doors blown off. He shot 1 of 10, but he took 10 shots. Against Cal Baptist in a very close loss, he took 22 shots. And in a close win over Long Beach State, he took 21 shots. So this dude is jacking up 3 after 3 after 3. Very inefficient, but the volume is there at 5'1". So if you want a volume guy, he's available. He's shooting only 24% from long range. 16 of 66, but the coach is letting him chuck it. He's got the 12th highest shot rate in the country at 35.4%. Not going to make many, but he's going to take a lot. All right, moving on to before we get to the last game here, let's check in with Tubby here. Loving NIL and portal times. Nothing like watching X when a guy comes for a visit to your school. Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's good. We're seeing the transfer portal with college football right now with the bowl games, which is going to be chaos. We're seeing some really good players in the portal already. I'll sidebar here for a minute. I don't know what you guys were like when you played video games as a kid. Some of you might still play now, which is cool. I just don't have the time. But when I played Madden, when I'd play, college football before it came back, college basketball games, like I'd play the game, but I got really hyped about being the GM, doing trades, doing the draft, like recruiting. Like that part of it was really like fun for me. Like in there, I remember spending like half a summer once at like 10 years old, like simming games and building like a dynasty roster on a college basketball game, and doing recruiting and having to talk guys out of transferring. Like that's fun for me. So I really like watching that stuff on Twitter, reading about those news, seeing those changes. I know a lot of people hate the portal. They want to be able to root for the same players for 4 years. You got to do it for 100 million years. It's more about the front of the jersey, not the back, right? I know it can be tough, but look at how fast you can reload. Like, look what ASU was able to do. For years, ASU's been a laughing stock in the Pac-12. They retool, they get some guys. They obviously have a great coach in Dillingham, and look what they were able to do. Win the Big 12 in their first year. Indiana, they've been a basketball school forever. Their football team has been awful. Kurt Signetti, year 1,
brings a bunch of guys with him. They hit the portal hard, get Rourke. They bring on his running back group from JMU, and suddenly they're in the playoff, the first expanded field playoff. That couldn't have happened without the transfer portal. And there's a million other cases. We saw, Miami making the first, when they first got Nigel Pack, they made their deep tournament run and then the Final Four run, and now they've bottomed out now. But just that wouldn't have been possible without being able to make that portal reload, and it just speeds up those development a lot fast. And again, the doom and gloom, like, well, I'm going to develop this player for 2 years and then somebody's going to come in and take him. That may be so, but then that program that took him has 2 or 3, 4 and 5-star players who aren't getting minutes. They're looking for minutes. If you have a little NIL money you can give them and an opportunity to, hey, come play here this year, play 35 minutes, take all the shots you want, get transferred back up to the P5 level and rent them for a year. You can be a very good mid-major team and do that. The Big West does this very well. Teams like UCSB, Santa Barbara, they've done it even before NIL was a thing. They were doing that. UC Davis is doing that very well. Like, there's a lot of High Point has Damarian Williams from Texas Tech. He's a monster there now. He goes from a role player, 7th option, to now like he's probably going to be a conference player of the year type. So there are teams at that level that do a very good job. Yes, you're going to lose your best player a lot, but you're going to be able to pick out those 4 and 5-star players. And some of those guys are just going to choose to go to your school first and then transfer up, because there's you're in a loss to see of 4 and 5 stars coming out of high school. You're getting courted, sure, but you're just another face there. You're not in the court yet. You're going to have to earn minutes. You might even, not even play that much. But if you decide to go to, I don't know, Oakland first, and you go and average 30 points a game, the next year you get the portal, Duke wants you, Alabama wants you, Auburn wants you, all those schools want you. So it goes both ways. I don't know. I don't know how at this point people don't see that still, but whatever. Tubby says, as a Louisville fan, it's saving our program. Hell yeah. You guys had done a fantastic job in the portal. No hate about taking my man Corin Johnson from me. But you guys just had dealt a bad hand, bad luck. Still be competitive, but Jesus, you need Traore back. Hopefully nobody else gets hurt the rest of the way. Have you seen the 2 7-footers from Michigan run their pick and roll game, Wolf and Golden? It's unreal. Yeah, dude, the Ivy League has so many good players in it. That's why you saw now in the Ivy League stump, there's some players who want to stay like past their grad year, but they have the rule like after 4 years you can't stay. So we would always see really good Ivy League players end up spending their grad year somewhere else, like even before NIL. That was normal. Now you're seeing those guys, Malik Mack after a year at Harvard, now he's at Georgetown. You're seeing these guys just, they're able to leave whenever they want. But the Danny Wolf was an absolute stud at Yale. Yale's been a very competitive team for years. Gosh, Bez Mbang, Matt Noling. Noling's at USC now. I'm surprised Mbang didn't go somewhere. But we see Yale competitive all the time. They had Azir Swain for years, my guy. They got the kid from Maione, who I think is in the NBA now, right? And then the kid from Baylor. I usually am really good at remembering these names. But they had the Baylor transfer, and they were really competitive in the tournament for several years. Ivy League gets a ton of talent. Like all the time. Makai Mason, Yale. I can name a million Yale players. Now I'm bothered because I want to know. I want to remember who the Baylor transfer was for Yale. I'll have to look it up later. But yeah, Matt, those bigs that can run the pick and roll. Michigan figuring it out. Dusty May is a great coach. The guards know their role. Roddy Gale is really good. Trey Donaldson's really good. It's crazy too, because Wolf, like the things he's doing this first like month and a half at Michigan, like he did them at Yale, but not to this scale. Like he's doing things now that I didn't see him do at Yale, and it's just like, damn. And the first couple of weeks of the season, Vlad Golden was just kind of standing around, and I remember myself included, like, man, is he just not going to get used? Now they're playing competitive games, and yeah, he's just as good as he was. Dusty May is a great coach. Michigan is basketball is on its way up for sure. variety. Yeah, absolutely. The tournament this year is going to be so nuts. Can't wait. It's crazy. It's I can't remember what show I was watching this morning on CBS on their YouTube channel, but said that like in football this year was great because there was no like one dominant team, and it truly felt like anybody could beat anybody on any given day. And that's how basketball typically is anyways, but it was that way in football, where normally like, you know, a undefeated Alabama team, even against SEC teams, like you just know they're not going to lose. And, you know, years ago, even as early as like 3 years ago, they're just never going to lose, right? If they did lose, it was like the total shock. Now you're seeing them lose to Vanderbilt. Now you're seeing, you know, teams. Oregon should have probably lost 2 games. They didn't. Their time's coming. And saw Michigan beat Ohio State. Like, if you're seeing that in football and you know that basketball naturally is already that way, like we're in store for such an insane tournament this year. There's going to be a crazy amount of upsets, I think. Might as well offer like $100 billion for a perfect bracket, because it ain't never going to happen in my lifetime or yours without the aid of a Gray Sports Almanac, which I do fantasize about a lot. All right, let's finish this up here. We got Cal Baptist versus SDSU. Appreciate you, by the way. Thanks for chatting with me here. This is a very tough game. Cal Baptist has some guys who project extremely well, but we have to really factor in the fact that SDSU, new faces, but still same defensive program, very tough. Not too fantasy friendly. They're going to be able to do some things here. They are 15-point favorites against Cal Baptist, total of 135.5. We just had, as I mentioned, Cal Baptist on a slate recently when they played, who was it, UCF. 41 fantasy points out of Daniels, who's priced there at 9K, Dom Daniels. Definitely worry about him going up against SDSU. The play that I was on heavy in that last slate they were on was Kendall Coleman, priced at 6'3", had 13 rebounds, didn't score a ton in that one, still put up 20 fantasy points. He had a 32 real point game against SMU, 14 and 15 the game before that against Fresno State. So definitely a guy that I like here. SDSU has some real giants in the front court, though. Don't know that Coleman's rebounding is going to come up for us here in this matchup, but definitely a good price for him. Overall, he's my favorite play on this team, most definitely. He spent a year at LSU, tortured Northwestern State. It was really good there for years. Probably main team viable, but just know that against SDSU, we're going to have to probably temper expectations to a degree. Martell Williams, who's a usual starter, did miss the UCF game. Only played 10 minutes in his last game there after being a 30-plus minute guy. So he doesn't have a designation on DraftKings, but you don't want to use him unless we see him actually starting. It is the last game on the slate. I don't think you really need to worry about him too much. He is priced at only 3.6. So if he was starting playing 30-plus minutes, obviously that is a great price point for him. You can't guarantee one way or another right now how that's going to shake out and if he's actually going to play. The starting 5 for Cal Baptist in the UCF game was Daniels, Kendall Coleman, Sam Silverstein, Adam Musa, and A.J. Braun. Off the bench, we saw Brantley Stevenson and Javonte Johnson play 20-plus minutes. Javonte Johnson, of course, spent many years at New Mexico and Colorado State. So maybe some more minutes for him in this one as well. He's priced at just 5.4K. On the SDSU side, everybody's still too cheap. You have Miles Byrd at 6'8". Has been a very steady fantasy point per minute player. Safe, certainly. Maybe the upside's lacking at that price point, but we still have the really cheap BJ Davis under 6K. I would expect him to be relatively popular. He has been pretty much every Aztec slate this season. Price did creep up to 6'3" against Houston, came back down after a couple of softer performances, but at 5K here in this spot, he's definitely one of the more viable main team looks. Then you also have Nick Boyd at 6'6". Expect him to be lower owned than BJ Davis, but he makes sense as a GPP pivot type play. 30-plus minutes, 10-plus shots, contributes in all categories, has really ascended and kind of become the de facto leader on this team. As far as the front court for this team goes, that up real quick. You have a couple of options. As far as if you can use them in main team, that's probably remains to be seen. But Jared Coleman-Jones and Magoon Guath, the freshman 7-footer. Guath had a really, really nice game last time out against, well, not last time, but against Fresno State. He actually was able to play 28 minutes in that one, avoid mostly foul trouble, 25-10, had 3 blocks, put up a monster 45 fantasy point game. He's priced at 4.5. Blowout win over San Diego. He didn't do a lot, played 14 minutes in that one. In a more competitive setting, you can typically rely on him to play 25 to 26 minutes at 4.5. You could do a little bit of an Aztec stack here. Not a very high usage guy, going to do most of his damage as a shot blocker and on the glass. He is the second highest block rate in the country right now. We'll need to develop further, but right now at 4.5, 3 blocks, a couple of rebounds, maybe 6 to 7 points. That's going to get the job done. And he fills a forward slot. Not that we need to fill forward slot because there are a lot of them. Coleman-Jones at 5K. That's your steadier, safe play, getting about 18 to 20 fantasy points per game. And then you have the younger Taj DeGugerville, who is priced at 4.8K. Been getting a ton of shots up lately. Took 10 against SD. Somebody who has to develop further, but those are your main viable players on this SDSU team. Davis as the popular chalk option, Boyd and Bird as GPPs, and I do not mind Magoon Guath. You also have Wayne McKinney there, the SD transfer at 4.6, but right now he's playing under 20 minutes, completely different role, more of a second or third option whenever he's on the floor, regardless of who that is. All right, the core for this slate, got to go Terrence Brown. I think my wishful thought that he would not end up being super chalky is probably not going to happen. So love Terrence Brown, all over him. In the same game, my favorite pay up overall in the slate in that one is Eric Dixon. I think both of those guys, if you start your lineups with those two, you can do a lot of damage. And then for value, Brandon Garrison for Kentucky. Just a real quick strategy note on this slate. Not only do I want the top 2 players from Villanova FDU, but I want a lot of Kentucky. I want Tay Davis. On the Louisville side, Connie Roofs as a value piece. Make a decision between Zuby and RJ Lewis. If you can afford them, you might not be able to. And then you have those value / mid-range options for the Aztecs that make a lot of sense, and picking right when it comes to Kevakaita, Fuseni Traore. So that's kind of how I'm looking at the slate there. All right, best bet opportunities. Let's go up here. So I mentioned the plus 29 for FDU. I don't know. Maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid too much there, but I just don't know that Villanova can beat them by 30 plus. So I am taking that plus 29 confidently. Pittsburgh minus 17.5. I don't like those big spreads. I purposely tried to avoid them, but EKU, like this one to me could be the minus like 24.5, and I would feel pretty good about that too. So minus 17.5 versus EKU. St. John's versus Bryant over 161. We hit an alt total today. Tulane and Southern Miss. It looked dire there. We need like 11 points in the last 2 minutes. And they got down to the last 45 seconds, 3 3-pointers and a layup. Thank you for that. Got to the alt total there. But I think the over 161 is a very safe number between Bryant and St. John's. And then Baylor versus Norfolk State. That one also over 143.5. Baylor about to drop like 90 on Norfolk State. They're not a scrub team. First of all, they are 25.5-point dogs, but they're not a scrub team. They can score. Baylor's a bit susceptible at times. And I do think that one gets played into the 150 range. Let's go to Prize Picks. Prize Picks was hit or miss today. We didn't get the John L. Davis. Man, John L. Davis, God, he's just not very good. And then Tomislav Isevich, he kind of hurt us a little bit. But we did hit the unders. I know we don't play unders all that often, but we hit several today. Albany, Amari Marshall's under on rebounds. Jordan Durkak's under on assists for Rutgers. We hit both of those. Looks like the board right now has no CBB on either Prize Picks or Underdog. So that'll be up in the Discord tomorrow and as part of the context notes that we release. And then you're about to get a ton of college football content coming your way in the next 24 to 36 hours. Very excited. Appreciate you guys as always. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight, Tubby, and everybody else. We'll be back Friday night, 10 p.m. right around 10 p.m. PST. I know it's late on the East Coast there. No Saturday morning show this time and no CFB show, but there will be content. And we will be grinding things out Saturday morning regardless in the Discord for Army, Navy, and the couple of bowl games that are taking place there, as well as the all-day college hoops slate that we will have fully invested. Let's get after it. Green screens, window trips. See you guys on Friday. Appreciate it. Take care and best of luck.